Which high-priced quarterback is worth paying up for this week? And which shootout should you game stack this week? We'll cover those topics and more on the Week 5 edition of the Football Guys Daily Fantasy Power Grid, presented by DraftKings. And guess what? We have a special guest filling in for John Lee this week. You guys might remember Ryan Hester from last year's show. Ryan, welcome back. It's good to see you. How you doing, buddy?
Thank you. I'm well. It's great to be back. I was hopeful that I'd fill in for Devin at some point to add a lot of value to the show. I'll do my best filling in for John, though. So John, sorry you're not here, and I guess sorry I am. But off we go. Let's have a fun week.
Here we go.
I like how John misses out after I have my best call of the year in Odell Beckham, but you know, it is what it is.
He was in he was in John's article last week too.
I think he agreed.
I wonder where
you
he got that idea from.
I like
we
how
all
Devin
get him from you. We all get him from you.
Yeah, exactly. I like how Devin immediately had the red Black Eye Joes up as soon as Ryan set foot on the show. I'm going to cover Vegas real quick this week, and then we're going to jump into quarterbacks. Basically, we've got a few blowouts at the top. We've got Kansas City, Baltimore, and Dallas, all with really high implied totals. They're facing Las Vegas, Cincinnati, and the Giants, respectively. Then there's a couple of high-scoring games that have a little bit smaller spread to them. Perhaps that could be a back-and-forth situation where you've got Jacksonville at Houston and Carolina at Atlanta. So we'll talk about those games. And the teams we're likely to avoid are the lowly, low-scoring Washington football team, Bengals, Eagles, and Dolphins. They're all implied totals less than 20 points this week. So we are going to try to tell you which games are worth game stacking, which ones where you only want to stack one side of the game, and we'll give you our plays of the week. Also, we've got a bit of a COVID-19 watch on the Buffalo at Tennessee game. We're recording this on Wednesday night. We're not going to speculate whether that game happens or not, but that is a game you're going to want to watch the details unfold as the week goes on. So let's go to quarterbacks, and I'm going to toss it to you first there, Devin. I want to hear about the quarterbacks you like this week.
I think this week it's interesting. At the top, you have Dak, who's in a good spot, and he's been putting up ridiculous numbers, but that team largely didn't do much for the first couple of quarters against Cleveland. In a game that they should be dominating, I'm not sure I'm going in that direction. This week. I kind of like the quarterback on the other side of the ball in Daniel Jones. I mean, we've seen for most of the year that this Dallas team really hasn't been able to stop the pass hardly at all. They've allowed 11 touchdowns in their last 3 games passing. So Baker Mayfield didn't tear the world up last week, but he didn't need to, largely because of turnovers in short field position. So I think in cash, at least to start this week, going cheap with Daniel Jones is an option that I'm looking at. And then up at the top, I think the way that I'm looking right now is it's tough. Probably Lamar Jackson, although is this the cheapest Jackson's been at 7,900 all year? It seems like it has been.
He's been in the 8,000s quite a bit. I'm not sure if it's lowest of the year, but he's come down a little bit. A lack of passing yards, maybe? I don't know.
He really hasn't had that monster game, right? So, I mean, I don't know if it's teams have figured him out or if it's just, sort of he's off to a slow start, but he's only thrown for 769 yards in his 4 games, which, is less than 200 yards per game. But, I mean, it's the Bengals, right? So, if the Bengals can score enough, this is a team that he ran for 152 yards and a touchdown last year in 1 game and 65 yards and a touchdown in another game. So if I'm looking at the top, I think that Lamar Jackson in a GPP he's higher risk. I mean, I'm not going to lie at 7,900, but I think he definitely could pay off.
Yeah, you kind of have to ask yourself with some of these high-priced quarterbacks, is their situation so good that maybe the running game carries the load? We do have a couple of quarterbacks who could be back this week, with Drew Lock potentially coming back after missing 2 games. Jimmy Garoppolo may return after missing 2 games. And then we got Kyle Allen starting over Dwayne Haskins for the Washington football team. Phil, I'm going to kick it over to you. Do any of those situations interest you, or you got another guy in mind for quarterback this week?
I've got quite a few guys in mind for quarterback this week. When I was running down the list, I could have named at least 5 players that I'd be comfortable with in a cash game lineup.
Yeah.
I will have some Daniel Jones. I think that Devin made a good call there. I do have a concern, though, because for all of Dallas's faults on defense, they pressure the quarterback on 32% of the snaps. So they do get to the quarterback. That's the 6th highest rate in the league. The Giants rank 27th in Football Outsiders adjusted sack rate. So their O-line stinks. There's a bit of a mismatch in the trenches. Daniel Jones ranks 36th out of 43 qualifiers in passer rating while under pressure. That's not good. So there is definitely a path to Daniel Jones disappointing despite the low price tag. And for that reason, I wonder if it's not crazy like a fox to just drop all the way down to Kyle Allen at 4,100.
And play him in cash.
4,100.
Right.
I think he's going to throw the ball 40 times at 4,100. He's got Terry McLaurin. Antonio Gibson is a threat out of the backfield. He's going to throw 40 times. I'm putting that out there more because I want to know what you guys think about that. Is it stupid or is it fun?
Ryan, what do you think?
It could be a little bit of both. Hey, if I can get if I can get a starting quarterback for the same price or less as 2 defenses, I'll look at it. Right? It's hard to go to Kyle Allen. He's not a name I wrote down. But Phil makes a good point. I kind of do agree with Phil on the Daniel Jones point, though. I think this is a really pivotal game for the Giants, for Daniel Jones in that passing game, right? So before the season started, we all looked. We said Daniel Jones redraft. The guy has high potential. He had more top 5 fantasy weeks than anybody except for Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, and Jameis Winston, I think, were the stats last year after week 3. So we saw the ceiling. We saw that he's a guy that can bring the ceiling. He's got rushing upside, all the things. But they had a really hard schedule to start the season, and that was part of the redraft forecast too. So now we're at a point where we know he went through a tough schedule, but his line is much worse than we thought it would be. He doesn't have Saquon Barkley, which we thought he would have. So maybe it's time to adjust expectations and realize like this just might not be a thing for the Giants offense this year. And this is the game I think that's really going to tell us that. So do we want to play him at 5,400? You can make a case for it. I would just as soon play Teddy Bridgewater at 5,900 if I'm going cheap quarterback with a similar build. I'll figure out a way to get that other 500 back somewhere else. We'll talk about other positions later in the show. But to me, that Daniel Jones is a little bit more risky than what I think the consensus is making him out to be this week. I think this could be a game where, we've seen Dallas for 3 weeks pass a ton, give up a ton passing. I think this could be one of those anomaly games where it flips a little bit, where they, the offense still goes nuts, but not 500 yards passing nuts, maybe more 200 yards rushing, still score 30 points, a little more Zeke Elliott, and a little less of the other team's passing game to keep up with them. Because the Giants, like Phil said, the offensive line stinks. So I don't think we have an opponent to make Dak Prescott throw for 500 yards. And so I think that's what we need to be concerned about when we go with Daniel Jones.
And I think my only counterpoint to that is on Daniel Jones. If you look at the schedule that he's faced, so he's faced Pittsburgh, Chicago, San Francisco, and the Rams. So he's faced quite possibly 4 of the most difficult defenses. This should be a night and day matchup compared to those 4 teams. Agreed.
That was part of the point. We know that he started the season with a really hard schedule. But where's the line? Like, where's the playmakers? It's tough.
Is it the line though, or is it the defenses that they're facing? It could be like
who could say? So I like he's on my list. But if you are skeptical, I guess I would just offer Bridgewater's there too, and can still give you a similar build if you like other guys at the same with the same type of build.
And I think if we're talking about guys like Daniel Jones and Teddy Bridgewater in cash, you've probably got some really high-priced running backs and receivers you're trying to cram into your lineup. Otherwise, or tight ends. Otherwise, I think you should be looking at safer quarterbacks. So I'll be curious to hear about kind of how your build progresses as we go through some of the other positions. Devin, I wanted to ask you about some GPP quarterbacks you've got in mind this week to go along with the other picks you made.
Yeah, I think that Kyler Murray is always in play against the
Yeah.
Jets. I mean, the Jets are just a train wreck of a
Even the
football
Jets
team.
fan agrees.
Like, I mean, I don't think you can go wrong there, and it doesn't need a lot of explanation.
Sure.
What are we doing with Patrick Mahomes?
That was the other
Because,
guy I wondered about.
Like,
I'm
the
playing him.
narrative. The problem is that the narrative on the NFL is turning so much more like a college game where you need that rushing upside. And I know that Mahomes has it, but at home against the Raiders, do we really think he's going to run all that much? I don't know.
I'm playing another Chief with rushing upside.
We'll talk about him in a minute, but I don't know. I'm kind of a never Mahomes guy. Not that I don't like him, but at 7,700, I would rather go up to Lamar Jackson or go down to Kyler Murray. And then the last guy I'll throw out there is Deshaun Watson, sort of a narrative street that going up against the Jacksonville defense that sort of has been hot and cold this year. They've had their moments, but they've been a little more exposed the last couple of weeks. So I think that, Joe Burrow threw for 300 yards last week and Ryan Fitzpatrick ran for a touchdown. So I think with no Bill O'Brien, a new offensive coordinator, this Houston team could come in and really try to make some headway and really try to unleash Watson.
Phil, you're sort of our resident GPP guy. Who else is high on your GPP list this week?
As a matter of fact, Devin nailed the three guys that I've got on the list. They were Lamar Jackson, because I want to keep picking on the Cincinnati linebackers, and I think Jackson could rush for, 200 yards as a ceiling, even though that's not close to the most probable outcome. It's certainly within the range, and I think that Joe Burrow has shown us enough that he could keep Jackson on task, playing for 4 quarters. Watson, I just think that, it's narrative driven, but there might be that effect, that whole ding dong the witch is dead thing going on with Bill O'Brien out of town, and that whole team might respond to it. There's a 54-point total in that game. They're at home, and I think they might have something to prove to O'Brien. And then Kyler Murray, I think, is interesting because what's going to happen in tournaments is similar to what happened last week with Dak Prescott, where he went under owned. He was 8.7% in the Millie Maker, which was 4th at quarterback. And I think the reason for that was because nobody trusted the Browns to hold up their end of the bargain in a shootout, right? So they looked at the opponent and they said, well, that's not a sexy game to stack. And I think they're going to do the same thing to Murray this week because it's the Jets. But, I mean, listen, the Jets give up 33 points a game. They are the worst. They've got Joe Flacco on the other end.
Yeah.
They've allowed multiple passing touchdowns in every game but one. And in that one game, Phillip Rivers only threw 21 passes. And the only rushing quarterback that they faced this year was Josh Allen. He went for 1457 and 1 on the ground against those Jets. I think we could easily see a ceiling game for Murray where we've only seen a floor the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, and Murray, has the rushing upside that you don't necessarily need a back and forth shootout game to hit a high ceiling game. I mean, Murray has no less than 7.8 rushing fantasy points in any game this year. He's running the ball like crazy, much to the chagrin of people who have Kenyon Drake on their season-long teams. But the Jets may or may not even have to keep up for Murray to hit that ceiling. I really like that call.
So kind of recapping, what I'm kind of hearing is some Daniel Jones potentially in cash, or Teddy Bridgewater potentially if you're going cheap. And then if you're going to pay up, I think a lot of people are going to be looking at like Dak Prescott or Lamar Jackson probably as the two more popular high-end picks. But we'll see how the builds shake out as we go through the rest of the positions. Be sure to use those YouTube comments to tell us which of our picks you like, which of our picks you dislike. What was that, Ryan?
I said I'd play Murray in cash before I played Jackson in cash.
Okay. That's a good call. All right. We're going to go to running backs. Let's go to Phil first to talk about running backs. We've got a couple of key injuries here with Nick Chubb being out and Sony Michel also being out this week. There's a few other odds and ends, but those are the two big ones I have on my list. Phil, talk to me about running backs.
So I think the first name that I want to click in most lineups is Ezekiel Elliott at any position. He's 7,800 on DraftKings, and if we don't like Dak Prescott, I think that by default means that we've got to like Elliott, and so will most other folks in tournaments. He has yet to hit the 100-yard bonus on DraftKings because Dallas hasn't been able to rush enough because they've been playing at this frenetic pace trying to catch up to holes that they've buried themselves in. But I think he's just had pretty bad luck. The game scripts, bad luck at the goal line. You had Prescott with 3 goal line scores in week 2. You had Pollard vulture one on a random drive that he was in on last week. And, I think that in this game, I think Dallas should control it. I think they've got an advantage in every sense over this Giants team. I think this is the week where you see a 30-touch, multi-touchdown, 100-yard rushing game from Elliott.
Dig it. Ryan, what do you think at running back this week?
I mean, yeah, I couldn't agree more. I liked Elliott, obviously as the high-end name to pick, but Phil just kind of locked that door and closed it shut. That's a great case. The other guy I like, speaking of ceiling games, speaking of increasing opportunity, Clyde Edwards-Helaire is a guy who's on a team that's a huge favorite, high scoring offense that we know will put up points. And we saw him in week 1 with the coming out party was all rushing, and that was the Devin disagrees and I'm talking. Well, here we are. We're back. We're back.
It's like old times.
We're back. But I mean, we've got a guy who had a rushing coming out party as a limited rookie, air quotes. In week 1, he's been getting more and more touches in the passing game lately, coming off a tough matchup against New England where, frankly, the team didn't have to do that much on Monday night. Big home favorite against a team that's gettable. And it just seems like a game that, he will have a multi-touchdown game very soon. I think it's this week, and I think he could add the 100-yard bonus in on top of it.
Well, yeah, Kansas City has the highest implied team total on the slate this week. They're favored.
I mean, they always do. It's just a matter of like what I think this week it comes via the rushing game as much as any other week.
But Devin, what are you thinking here? You don't care for this pick?
He's going to be the highest rostered running back on this slate, and
Cash game.
I don't think you can play him in GPPs. I think he's a prime fade candidate this week. The touches have been far too inconsistent this year to really trust him, right? So week 1 coming out party, week 2, week 3, you kind of got value out of the passing game a little bit, but the touches weren't really there, even in games that Kansas City had largely in control. So in a cash game setting, fine. I think he's a fine play. I just can't do it in a GPP setting. I would much rather go to Kareem Hunt at the same price.
Yeah, I'm okay with that logic. It was the qualifier is he's a cash game play. You just click the name and figure out the rest, just like you did with, like Phil said, with Elliott. He hasn't scored since week 1, so you could argue there's some regression there for a guy that's a major part of a major offense.
Devin, who else do you like at running back?
Philly, you look like you had something to say.
No.
Yeah, real quick, one more thing on Edwards. Hello.
Oh, Phil hung up.
Anyway,
there he is.
His name's Sam Hoppin, and he's he's a real visual chart stat guy, and he tracks this stat called high value touches. It's the number of carries inside the 10-yard line plus catches as a percentage of total touches. Edwards-Helaire is getting 6 of those per game of these high value touches, and 82% of the running back touches over the last 3 games. Which, by the way, have come against the rush defenses of the Chargers, the Ravens, and New England. So he hasn't had a cupcake in there. So I think there is definitely a strong case to be made in support of Ryan's take that he's due. And eventually it's going to come, and this week seems as good as any. I'm just curious, Devin, I wanted to ask, you said you think he's going to be the highest rostered running back. Where do you see him in relation to Elliott at $1,000 more?
It's close. I think that it's going to be somewhere in like the 30-27 range between the two of them. I think they're both 25 to 30% rostered. As we stand on Wednesday, things can obviously change very quickly based off of one player being out. But I think I might come in slightly below the field on Edwards-Helaire there, but I still want some exposure just in case this is the regression week.
And it seems like our lineup optimizers like Mike Davis this week. Devin, are you into that pick or not?
Sure. No, I mean, there's nothing really to get excited about for Mike Davis. He's not that great of a running back. He's 27 years old. He's, going up against the Falcons, and Ryan's take is always start running backs against the Falcons. But I mean, the Falcons run defense has actually been pretty good this year. They held Ezekiel Elliott to 89 yards in the touchdown, shut down Chris Carson, shut down David Montgomery, and then held Aaron Jones largely in check last week. So, but I think where Davis can perform is as a receiver, and he's had 13 receptions in his last 2 games. Brings up his floor a little bit, considerably.
But hey, nothing to get excited about. 13 receptions, 3 games, nothing to get excited about.
No, it's great, right? So, but at 6,500, it was better when it was like he was like 5K, and now he's 6,500, and it's a little bit challenging to play him, but I think he's a cash game play if you're going to play him. I don't think he's a GPP play just because he doesn't necessarily have that upside. I like Kareem Hunt more than Mike Davis, to be honest. I think that Kareem Hunt is in for a big spot. The matchup is a challenging one, but I've been pumping the Kareem Hunt train largely all season in that he's a better running back than Nick Chubb. And I think he's more versatile. He's a better receiver. He's a strong running back. This was a guy who finished, top 3 or top 4 in 2017 or 2018 when he was with the Chiefs overall. And I think he's in like I said, the matchup's a tough one, but going up against Indy at home, they're going to have to run the ball through Kareem Hunt. I think he gets 20, 25 touches, and they feature him with 5 or 6 reception upside.
Yep.
Phil, who else you got on your running back list?
Sure. So these are going to be for GPPs, and I like Josh Jacobs on the other side of that Kansas City game, which I guess is a little bit counterintuitive because it seems like Kansas City is going to blow out the Raiders. But when I'm thinking about how the Raiders are going to move the ball on the Chiefs, Kansas City has the top-ranked pass defense DVOA, but they rank 27th against the rush. So we've got a little bit of a run funnel there, and Jacobs is the guy for the Raiders. He's got 75% of their backfield touches this season, including 46% of their running back receptions, which is what we wanted to see coming into the year on Jacobs, and we weren't quite sure was going to happen. And just anecdotally, I mean, you could see it when you watch the games. Running backs are just ripping long runs against the Chiefs, but they don't have the ability to stick with the run for most of the game. But you saw David Johnson bust a long touchdown in week 1. You saw Eckler have a big game on the ground in week 2. And then Damian Harris last week, came off the bench and ran for 100 yards against that defense. So I think in a game stack scenario, if you're stacking up the Chiefs, I think I would run it back with Jacobs ahead of just about anyone else on the Raiders. And then the other guy that I've got here is Antonio Gibson, and I want to give John Lee a shout out. I don't want him to think forgotten about him here. John Lee this morning went on a tweet story. J.D. McKissick. He was pointing out. Could you guys hear me?
Yeah. You're cutting in and out a little bit, but you said Antonio Gibson over J.D. McKissick. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Sorry, it looks like my connection is a little bit unstable.
Anyway, Let's talk about another guy, Miles Gaskin.
Sure.
Going up at 4,500, going up against San Francisco, and Gaskin is a guy who he's not going to do much, I think but he has pass upside. So he's caught 8 passes in his last 2 games, something like that, and at the same time he's seen 32 touches. So I think if you're looking for a cheap flyer to go down, Gaskin is a way to save salary at the position.
And going back to the Josh Jacobs kind of note, I think he's a DraftKings only play. FanDuel really juiced his price up, so I think he's a DraftKings special. Ryan, did you have any other running backs on your list?
Yeah, I mean, just back to the to the Mike Davis, Kareem Hunt situation. Look, I'm not going to get into which one is a better call. Just that, let's monitor the Kareem Hunt groin injury. I mean, Chubb left the game early. Hunt got 11 carries in a game where they rushed 300 yards. They got creative rushing Odell Beckham. So just don't listen to this show and just lock in Kareem Hunt without kind of checking on Dr. Gene first and other reports. I mean, Kareem Hunt fully healthy, I'm probably going to agree. Despite the Mike Davis floor, I mean, the Hunt will have a floor and a ceiling, which would be higher than Davis. So no objection there, despite Devin hating on me as usual. One guy I will mention though, that we haven't talked about, if you want to go a little bit cheap, not quite as cheap as Myles Gaskin, but somebody that does score touchdowns. David Johnson is 5,200 against Jacksonville, who defense, as Devin, I think, pointed out earlier, has been rather inconsistent this year, but I think we can agree not exactly a defensive stalwart. And Jacksonville has allowed 6 or more receptions to 4 different running backs already this year. So you've got that. You've got David Johnson as a home favorite. If you even want to throw in the narrative street there, you can. Washed if you want to make that argument, but the guy is getting volume in an offense. But you want to play Myles Gaskin.
Well, here's the thing with David Johnson, right? So there's a scenario where any running back on the roster is better than David Johnson, and the only reason he was starting was because of Bill O'Brien, who traded DeAndre Hopkins for him. So you can't bench the guy who you just traded DeAndre Hopkins for.
Is this a Duke Johnson Cleveland situation or I'm trying to think of which retort I should make. The one that talked about Myles Gaskin or the one that talks about Duke Johnson? You guys tell me. I mean, I'm playing David Johnson before I play Myles Gaskin.
I'm not. Okay. And if you're a regular, I would make a bet on this show, but you don't show up to these nearly enough.
Well, I'm happy you'd like to have me more.
He only has 9 receptions in 4 games. Like, that's not David Johnson that we know.
Okay.
Phil, did you want to finish making your point about Antonio Gibson? You were saying that John Lee was tweeting about how he liked Gibson a lot.
No, John Lee was actually tweeting about how he liked J.D. McKissick a lot.
Okay.
And I think the point that I want to make is that maybe there's some value in that backfield because I love Gibson. John's point was that when Carolina went into a negative script last year, Kyle Allen targeted CMC, Christian McCaffrey, relentlessly. And he sees McKissick leading the Washington backfield in snaps, having the most targets out of that backfield as the guy who is going to appear on 5% or less of rosters and could be in a first-place lineup. My contention is that only one out of Gibson and McKissick is any good at all, and that would be Gibson. And Gibson is seeing 65% of the rushing attempts, all of the goal line work, which I think matters against the Rams, who have the 28th DVOA defense against the run, 7th versus the pass. So I see quite a few ways for Gibson at only 5K to get to where he needs to be for a second straight week.
Nice. All right, let's move on to wide receivers.
Something completely different.
And now for something completely different, please subscribe, hit that bell, and give us a thumbs up or give us a thumbs down if you'd like as well. All right, let's talk about wide receivers. We're keeping an eye on Julio Jones. Did not practice on Wednesday with a hamstring injury. And, we've got that Tennessee-Buffalo game that's a little bit tenuous right now. But if it did happen, Corey Davis is out because he tested positive for COVID-19. And A.J. Brown looks like he could come back this week.
Adam Humphries also out.
Gotcha. All right, so let's go to Ryan first on receivers. Tell us about the receivers you like this week.
Yeah, receiver is the toughest one because, we talked about liking Elliott. We talked about liking Edwards-Helaire, at least I did. And we're going to talk about a certain tight end we like when we normally don't like to spend up, but I think there's somebody we should spend up for. So I'm struggling on the receiver front. I'm certainly struggling to spend a significant amount of money. I mean, Amari Cooper's up there, right, at the expensive end. The volume suggests he's a guy you want to take. If you really break down this game, and you agree with what Phil said earlier, this is a Zeke Elliott game. Should we really be spending a lot of money on Amari Cooper? Bless you, Devin. Just sneezed on mute, thankfully. But for me, I'd rather, the receivers I maybe like most are on the other end of this game. And it's more because of price and game script. But I'll just go with Darius Slayton here at 4,800. And the note I have as opposed to big D is not much D. And that's what I'll leave it at with Darius Slayton there as a reason to pick him in that game. The other one, if you really want to get wild, is, Damiere Byrd is the min price, $3,000. He allows for 3 running backs greater than 6,400 and George Kittle, who we'll get to later. So if that's something you're into, he had 10 targets last week, led the Patriots in air yards. It did get 4x value on what would have been a $3,000 salary. So if you think he can get somewhere near those mildly pedestrian numbers again, then he's a good guy to put in your cash game.
It's the wrong 3K receiver, but okay.
All right, Devin, who's the right 3K receiver?
Olamide Zaccheaus.
I was wondering.
Yeah. 15 targets?
Yeah, 15 targets in the last 2 games, 12 receptions, 8 for 86 with against Green Bay last week, and it's all dependent on Julio Jones being out. I think that if Julio Jones plays, you can't really play Zaccheaus, but at 3K, I trust him a little bit more than Damiere Byrd.
I'm just curious, what do we do with Calvin Ridley, who's 7,500? He was the overall wide receiver 1 coming into last week, and we got a bagel in a nationally televised game. I think people are going to be looking to stack Carolina and Atlanta quite a bit. And, if last week never happens, I think Ridley is one of the top plays on the slate. I'm curious, where do you guys think he's going to fall in GPPs? Do people bank on a bounce back, or are they now scared of him commanding the other team's top corner or whatever happened last week?
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting because it'll entirely be on how the narrative is perceived. So Jair Alexander has been basically playing at an all-pro level and shadowed Ridley last week. So Carolina doesn't have a Jair Alexander on their team. So if that narrative gets floated around, his roster percentage will just keep going up, and people will just forget last week. My concern is that he's a little bit of a Michael Gallup of last year, and we've seen Calvin Ridley do this where he's put together 3-4 games in a row, and then he's kind of regressed and gone away for a couple games in a row. So in cash, I'm not playing Calvin Ridley all year, and I think I said it on one of the earlier shows, but I just don't trust the guy.
Phil, who do you like this week?
So on the other side of that game, I think a pretty safe play is Robbie Anderson at 5,900. Kind of strange. I'm reminded of Joe Bryant, who always likes to say things change quickly around here. And Robbie Anderson as a cash game play personifies that quite a bit. And I say we, meaning me really, but most of the fantasy community had him pigeonholed as a one-trick pony, a guy that could get downfield and outrun defensive backs and catch splash plays, and that's about it, which is not what he's doing this year. He leads the Panthers in targets from 0 to 9 yards, which is just an incredible, mind-blowing stat to me. So Matt Rule and Joe Brady are using him as a wide receiver 1. He's catching the ball at all levels. He's exceeded a 3x multiple of his current salary in 3 out of 4 games this season. And obviously in Atlanta, the matchup couldn't be very much better. Only 5 teams have allowed at least 800 yards total to wide receivers this season. And out of those 5 teams, the Falcons have allowed the fewest touchdowns. So I like Robbie Anderson. I would consider him a cash game play, even though, again, I'm not really a cash game player. And in GPPs, I think I would buy the dip on DJ Moore because their usage is really pretty similar. And I think that I think people just don't like DJ Moore anymore. I think he's disappointed now for too many weeks. And I think he gets the same great spot. So I like both of those Carolina receivers quite a bit.
So when you banged the drum on Henry Ruggs in week 1, it was really Robbie Anderson and you just got them confused?
Listen, Henry Ruggs was going to smash that week if he doesn't wreck his knee. That is well documented, and I stand by that take.
Yeah, that's a fair point. Devin, who else you got at receiver this week?
Yeah, I do like Robbie Anderson. I think he's in a good spot. Amari Cooper certainly in a good spot. Any love for Tyreek Hill?
I think you have to have some love for Tyreek Hill here.
I mean, he seems to be going under the radar the last couple of weeks, and his price has gotten down to $6,900, which to me is against the Raiders. He can catch several long passes and have quite a big day. So he's certainly on my list. N'Keal Harry also on my list at $4,300 against Denver. We've talked about it all year that this Denver secondary isn't what it has been in the past, and I think that N'Keal Harry could have a nice bounce back in a GPP format. And then it's a little bit tough. I mean, going up, do I really want to spend up on Amari Cooper, $7,400 on Amari Cooper? Not really in a game that they should be winning. Do I want to spend almost $8,000 on DeAndre Hopkins? Not particularly. I don't know. There's not a lot of great high upside guys. I'm going to go back probably in cash to one of these Rams receivers, and it's likely going to be Robert Woods, who I seemingly go to quite frequently, although he's really been quiet the last couple of weeks. And I don't know if he's getting more focus or just overall more attention now that Brandon Cooks isn't there, but I think that he's in a decent spot. I don't know if he's cash viable now that I think about it, but at $6,400, I think that he's going to go underlooked. And just going down the list a little bit, I think we're good. There's not a lot of options here.
I'll go back to you here in a second, Ryan. What I'm hearing a lot of here is find your sort of dart throws on receiver because you want to pay up at running back and probably tight end and maybe even quarterback.
I think you find the game script that fits well and matches a receiver's take.
Ryan, what were you going to say there?
Yeah, I mean, I've got a couple more. Again, just speaking to the uncertainty of the position, right? So the theme I used at running back with Clyde Edwards-Helaire is we're just due for a blow-up game. Marquise Brown is going to have a blow-up game. Devin just said about Tyreek Hill, he could get deep and score multiple touchdowns against this team. That's true of Tyreek Hill against anyone. That's maybe slightly less true, but still true of Marquise Brown against anyone. I mean, if Lamar Jackson can throw an accurate deep ball, which was a big-time offseason focus of his, Marquise Brown will be somebody we'd be talking about as a cash game play at this point, especially at this salary. He's been wide open multiple times. And eventually they're going to have to throw a little more than, 25 times a game. And he's one of the guys they're throwing to. So he's another one. Another, slightly sneaky one is, 5,600 on DraftKings, Deontay Johnson. So, the Steelers didn't play last week. So in the DFS world, we forget about these teams. Well, hey, I'm on the show less this year. I'm watching one team mostly, so let's talk about them. No, but Mike Tomlin talked up the Philly front seven this week. They're a rotating group of very good players. Their back four, not so much. So Johnson is not only the quick hitter target, who's kind of a bubble screen guy, leads the team in target share, but also last week or 2 weeks ago, last game before his concussion, they threw probably 2 or 3 deep balls to him as well. And so, you've got a little bit of that insulated volume potential with the ceiling potential if he does get and connect on a deep target again. And just somebody that, again, taking guys off a bye in our recency bias DFS world is never a bad thing for tournaments.
Yeah. Phil,
Odell Beckham on FanDuel.
Odell Beckham on FanDuel specifically?
6,800. He's only 200 more than DJ Moore. I'll take that all day.
Yeah, I think it's a good call. Phil, you got any other receivers you like?
The only ones that have not been covered.
Yeah.
Actually, there's just one, Michael Gallup. I think that Cooper will be high rostered despite the salary and the difficulties of fitting him under the cap. Maybe it's not in the common roster construction, but it will be as a standalone. The Giants have one respectable cornerback. It's James Bradbury. He's going to be shadowing Amari Cooper. That leaves Gallup one-on-one on the outside with someone called Isaac Yedem. Isaac Yedem, who is a failed third-round pick of the Broncos, who signed with the Giants. And per Pro Football Focus, he has allowed the 7th most yards per route covered this season. So Michael Gallup's got the exploitable matchup, and he'll be leverage on both Elliott and Cooper, and probably CeeDee Lamb, who's got a pretty soft price despite his recent production.
Nice. Be sure to check out all of our content over at footballguys.com/DFS. We've got our daily Fantasy Pro subscription over there if you're not a subscriber already, and we're running our in-season discounts. So check those out. Let's talk about tight ends. Devin, I'm going to come to you first to talk tight ends. The injury of note on my list is Noah Fant. Does not look like he's going to play this week. Did not practice Wednesday. But their depth chart doesn't look that great. But any other guys you'd like to mention?
Jonnu Smith.
Yeah.
I mean, if this game plays, who are they going to throw to?
Yep.
No AJ Brown's iffy. Maybe he might play, but no Adam Humphries out of the slot, who's been a target machine, and no Corey Davis. So if this game plays against Buffalo, I think he's. If you can go up, you probably should. But Buffalo has allowed 130 yards to Mike Gesicki, 88 yards to Darren Waller. They've had trouble stopping the tight end most of the year. So Jonnu Smith is probably my favorite mid-range guy, and I'll let the other guys talk about some of the high-range guys.
Ryan, I heard you mention George Kittle earlier. Tell me more.
Play George Kittle.
Awesome. Phil, who do you like this week?
I actually prefer Kelce to George Kittle. And since John Gruden became the Raiders head coach, Kelce has saved some of his best performances for the Raiders, including a 12-catch, 168-yard, 2-touchdown receiving line in 2018. He went for 100-plus yards and a touchdown against them last year in a game. Las Vegas, they haven't been tested by tight ends this year. They've played Carolina, New Orleans, New England, Buffalo. These are offenses that don't really feature the tight end the way that the Chiefs do. And, not that Travis Kelce ever needs a matchup to be viable, but when you've got the Chiefs at home favored by nearly 2 touchdowns, implied to score 35 points, those are the types of setups where you want to roster tight ends. And he's priced $600 below his season high, and that's presumably because we haven't seen a ceiling game from him this year. But listen, it's Travis Kelce. I could have just said play Travis Kelce, and we could have moved on to Devin.
Do you think so? Let's talk about strategy just for a second. So, is it possible to play both Kelce and Kittle in the same lineup? We talked about how cheap and how there's not a lot of great receivers, but you're paying $6,600 and $6,400. Both of them have upside. I don't know that I hate it.
No, so looking at receivers right now, Will Fuller, 6,600, Cooper Kupp, 65, DJ Chark, 65, the aforementioned Odell Beckham, 64, Robert Woods, 64, Marquise Brown, 63. I cannot confidently say that any or all these guys would outscore both of those tight ends.
If you just said my 3K guy at wide receiver, or what we normally pay for a tight end is around 3K, and you Zaccheaus or Bird or both. I don't know if I would go both, but you get that. You essentially get that 3K price in your lineup. I don't know. It's something I'm thinking about doing. It's a little bit of a unique situation. Do I think that Kittle's going to do anywhere close to what he did last week? No, but they're both in good spots.
If he does half of what he did last week, you still have wide receiver numbers. I mean, they both play wide receiver, but let's be honest. Yep. So it's a really good question, because I was filling out lineups earlier before the show, and I'm sitting here grinding over receivers between 62 and 65. So maybe you just play both of those guys.
I'd have to go back and look at the statistics about, big GPP wins with 2 tight end lineups. I know it's completely possible, but there's something that makes me feel comfortable about having extra receivers instead of 2 tight ends. And
well,
maybe
part of
that's
the
just a bias.
salary relief, right? So
yeah,
in some weeks you just need salary relief to put together a competent lineup. So you'd have to look at weeks where there was a 3K crapper.
Yeah,
that was in a decent spot, and that doesn't come around very often.
Nope. And John used to make the argument on occasion, I think, that like the Gronks and the Grahams back in the day, and Kelce, those are your wide receiver 1. I mean, you're getting wide receiver 1/2 numbers for 66 and 6,400 when your real wide receiver 1s are 7,500 and more.
We've been talking about John way too much this show. Can we please not?
Hey, shout out to you, John.
Phil, who else you like at tight end this week?
So Eric Ebron is a 4K crapper. There's not many pay down options at tight end. It gets really thin when you start looking for savings. Ebron is getting more involved in the offense. 12 total targets in his previous 2 games, scored a touchdown. We've got that same spot that I was talking about for Travis Kelce, with Pittsburgh as home favorite of more than a touchdown. A 26-point implied total is high enough. And the Eagles are the team that Kittle just annihilated. But they've also been smoked by Tyler Higbee for 3 touchdowns this season. Logan Thomas in week 1. That was the only defense he was able to actually convert some of those targets into fantasy points against. So I think you're getting the matchup, you're getting a good game environment, and you're getting a guy who's at least a proven red zone producer in Ebron. And then as just a complete dart throw, we said Noah Fant was out, right? And we know that that Brett Rippon is the quarterback in Denver, and they're going to favor, throwing.
Is back.
Oh, is he back this week?
Maybe.
Okay.
Practice today.
I don't know. Even if he's back, I guess it depends on who they're going to play. Is it going to be Nick Vannett, or is it going to be Locke's guy then? Is it Albert O? But I would be interested to, I don't know if I'm playing these guys. I'll put that out there, but I will say I am going to pay attention to the beat writers out there, and in the event that Albert O is in line for significant snaps, I am intrigued.
Ryan said no. He threw up the poorly drawn, frowny-faced black-eyed Joe.
Yeah, sorry guys. In my off-season stint, I lost my true Joes. But Phil said scrolling down to crappers, and I just scrolled down our single lineup builder here, and in the same screen I see Nick Vannett and Jake Butt, and then Phil mentioned another guy. So I think we're done with the conversation on the Denver tight ends, given that there's 3 of them.
Yes.
I think maybe it's just not the right move this week, but I like the logic of we might have a guy out and we got to go with it. But Ebron, I agree with. Last we saw Pittsburgh, they were throwing him wide receiver routes, including end zone fades for touchdowns. So I do like that call.
Yeah, my normalized strength of schedule likes Ebron this week. If you're looking for like a weird sort of low rostered guy. Let's talk about defenses. Devin, I want to hear if this is a place where you're saving some salary. You usually is, but tell me, is this a week where you're dropping down to a cheap defense and taking a chance?
I don't know that I'm doing that this week. If I was going to, it would be Houston against Jacksonville. J.J. Watt has talked a big game this week against Bill O'Brien, and there's talks about him potentially being the reason that he was fired. So, I mean, it's 2,600 against Jacksonville. If you need it, I think that's the play. And then going up, I do like the Rams against Washington and Kyle Allen. I would have liked it a lot more if Dwayne Haskins was playing, but at 4K...
That's why he's not playing, I guess.
I thought you liked Dwayne Haskins.
I mean, I liked him as a college quarterback, but at 4K, I don't know that I can get there. So I think that that's a bit of a challenge. I also think that Kyle Allen is a little bit of a dump-off quarterback, so he's not really that exciting of a guy that he could turn the ball over, certainly, but I don't think that the Rams' upside is as big as what it otherwise could be. I'll let the other guys talk about some other plays.
Phil, who do you like a defense this week?
The Arizona Cardinals are playing against Joe Flacco, you guys. I think that's one that you got to look at immediately. If I'm paying up, which I would like to do, but there really aren't many ways to do it, so I probably will end up with a decent amount of Houston, who's at a good price, like Devin said. But I think Pittsburgh would be the top defense to pay up for. The Eagles have been sacked 14 times. That's the third most in the league. And not surprisingly, by association, Carson Wentz has thrown 7 interceptions. That leads the league. And Pittsburgh has one of the elite defenses in the NFL. So you can't go wrong there. And then in GPPs, I'll take the Cowboys defense against Daniel Jones for all the reasons that we already mentioned.
Ryan, I intentionally came to you last on defenses to make sure that someone else took your top picks. What do you have left?
Shame on you, Phil. Shame on you. Had some good sack numbers on Philly allowing a lot of sacks and Pittsburgh sacking the quarterback a lot. That's all what we look for. They're super obvious. No need to waste any time. But I mean, 3,800. Can you play them in cash? It's hard to recommend such a thing given the week, but they're going to be the highest scoring defense this week. So, I get them in when you can, especially in GPPs. Like Phil said, the whole pay up to be contrarian on defenses is obviously a viable strategy, and they're the ones I would go with. And then Houston was the if you can't afford them, cash game play.
Yeah.
LS on FanDuel at 3,500.
Nice.
FanDuel always seems to have these weird defenses that are almost must play.
Yeah. I have a hunch that people are going to end up spending a little bit down on defense because of all these other high-priced players we've mentioned that people want to cram into their lineups. I don't feel like there's a ton of super obvious cheap guys you're going to find salary relief
There's
for
2
this
3K
week.
receivers.
But are you really going to put 2 of them in your lineup?
No.
Oh, but all you need is one.
Yeah. Maybe.
There's the to me this week, it seems like that middle layer is going to be key. I mean, you've got a lot of guys at a lot of positions between 6,400 and 6,800 that are viable, and just picking the right ones is going to be the tough part.
That's going to be the challenge. All right, let's talk about some stacks here. Ryan, we're going to go to you first since your defensive hopes and dreams got completely crushed. Let's hear who your favorite stacks are this week.
Yeah, I mean, Phil took all these earlier too, but the Dak Prescott Michael Gallup was the one that I really liked. I mean, just because we mentioned like every other Cowboy, and they seem like an offense that are capable of sustaining multiple folks every week. And if one guy goes maybe 1 or 2 weeks without having a huge game, he's probably the guy you just want to pick the next week in a GPP because it's going to happen eventually. After that, also Teddy Bridgewater, DJ Moore was another one I wrote down. Mike Davis was in my first cash game builds. Robbie Anderson is popping off the charts on our lineup builders. And so, DJ Moore's a guy who I think, like Phil said, was a fantasy darling. People are souring on, but the guy's wildly talented. And so I think that's somebody that we shouldn't overlook. And then, I said it earlier, but let's go back. Lamar Jackson and Marquise Brown. Brown is talented enough for an explosion game. He's due for one. He's got no touchdowns yet. He's got a lot of targets. He's like 7th in the league, I think, in air yards, despite not having a ton of targets, only 6 per game, I think. And that offense is eventually going to be volume-based. So those are the couple that I like.
I would argue that you could stack Cowboys or Ravens in cash games, especially if it's sort of like a cash plus lineup that you're looking for where, you might be in like a 100-person, tournament or even like a smaller sort of tournament. I think it works really well. Phil, it sounds like you've got a canine helping you with your picks right now.
I think there's a lot of upside in stacking Deshaun Watson with Will Fuller and then running it back with DJ Chark and or James Robinson. And I also think there's a lot of ways too that I think that game could definitely shoot out. And I think that there's going to be some lower plays on especially the Houston side. Maybe mix in guys like Randall Cobb for uniqueness, possibly Brandon Cooks after he disappointed the entire world last week. So stack that game up.
People are also going to be looking at potentially stacking Matt Ryan with one of his pass catchers. That could be pretty popular. And then I think Kyler Murray and Hopkins are probably going to be one that not as highly rostered, but it's kind of one that seems to be in play every week in terms of GPPs, especially if you're mass multi-entering. Ryan, any closing thoughts? Thank you for joining us and filling in for John Lee. I really appreciate you jumping in here.
Thanks for having me back. I appreciate it. It's good to be back in the saddle. I hope that everybody listening also reads all of our stuff. And one other duty that I dropped in somebody's lap this year was trend spotting. So big shouts to Ryan Zaccheaus for writing that and letting the article live on. He's doing a great job with it. So I still check in on it every week, which thankfully doesn't take nearly as much time as writing it does every week. So please validate Ryan's time by reading that one. It's a really good one.
Yep, that's an excellent recommendation. Be sure to check out all of our content over at footballguys.com. We'll be back next Friday morning with our Week 6 episode. On behalf of Ryan Hester, Devin Knotts, and Phil Alexander, I'm Austin Lee saying thank you for watching, and thanks for being a football guy. Be sure to check out all of our content over at footballguys.com/DFS by clicking the button in front of Devin's face. And if you'd like to subscribe to our YouTube channel, be sure to press the button that's on Phil's face. And if you want to see our latest video, click that giant box that's in front of John Lee's face. Check all that stuff out. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching.